Action's Vice President, Brent Kylan.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome back. Welcome back to the afternoon session of Pray, Vote, Stand Summit. We are going to get underway here in just a minute, but before we do that, have a couple of quick announcements for you, a couple of housekeeping items that we want to make sure everybody is aware of. A couple of security things for tonight. We do appreciate everybody being understanding with our enhanced security tonight. Just a reminder, there are no backpacks allowed in the ballroom, and all bags are subject to search. Today's afternoon session will end right at 4:10. And we'll need to clear the area as quickly as possible for the Secret Service to do a sweep right at 4:10 this afternoon. So please take all of your belongings with you on that. Also, the ballroom doors will reopen at 6 p.m. tonight for the evening session. And please allow extra time to get through the security screening at the top of the stairs by the West registration. Also, there will be several members of the media in attendance tonight, so please do be respectful as they cover this event. We also want to make sure everybody is aware of the straw poll, and we're hoping everybody will participate in that. We have a presidential straw poll here at Pray, Vote, Stand Summit this year, and you all have the opportunity to vote in that. There are two questions. You can vote on who is your top preference for president in 2024, and who is your top preference for vice president in 2024, and we're hoping we have good participation, so again, encourage everybody to do that. Now, for those of you who are wondering how to vote in this, we, for the record, don't have drop boxes that you can use, but we do have a couple of other things you can do, all right? So the best way to do that is actually through your name tag. You should all have a name tag. There's a QR code on this. If you take your cell phone, just scan that QR code and a link will come up. Just follow the prompts, look for that button on the straw poll. It should walk you through all of that. If for any reason you do have trouble voting through that QR code, there are a couple of kiosks at the registration desk that you can use. So you know these results are going to be tabulated and announced publicly tomorrow. So voting is underway now, and then it will go through noon tomorrow. So be sure that you participate in that. Also, don't miss the exhibit hall right across the hall here. If you haven't had a chance to be in that yet, that's in the Ambassador Ballroom. You'll find phone charging stations, complimentary coffee from 7 Weeks Coffee, a Pray, Vote, Stand Summit store where you can personalize certain items, media row, and more. So a lot of exciting stuff over there. And then lastly, for those of you who are students, we do have a student mixer tonight, and I don't think you'll want to miss this. If you're a high school student or a college student, there's a special meal just for you. That will be in the Palladium Room, 5:30 to 7 tonight, and there is some incentive. There is free food in that, so you're not going to want to miss that. So that concludes the announcements this afternoon. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy the afternoon program here.
Please welcome back to the stage Family Research Council President, Tony Perkins.
All right, how was lunch? It was good. Well, we had how was the morning session? Was it good? The afternoon session is going to be great, and then this evening is going to be great. And for those, as Brent was saying, there's free food for the students. Now, here, we believe that words have meaning, so it does mean students. You can identify as a student and go and get free food, okay? So this is the right, all right? We actually believe that words have meaning. All right, to kick off our afternoon session, I want to introduce someone that actually I've probably known longer than anyone else that I have known here in Washington, D.C. I first met him when he was a radio talk show host, and I was in office. I was in Indiana. I was from my home state of Louisiana. I had introduced the nation's first covenant marriage law, and I was up there testifying before the Indiana State Legislature in Indianapolis. And so I got a call to go do a morning talk show, and I'll be honest, I didn't want to really get up that early and go into the studio for this show, but I did, and I'm glad I did, because it wouldn't be long until that microphone was vacated because the talk show host was soon elected to Congress. 2 years later, or 3 years later after that, our paths crossed once again as he was a rising member of the Republican Party here in Washington, D.C., and I joined the Family Research Council. He quickly ascended the ranks of leadership, becoming the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, became the chairman of the GOP conference, and from there went on to become governor of Indiana, and most recently, the 48th Vice President of the United States. Please welcome my good friend, Vice President.
Well, thank you very much. How about a round of applause for Tony Perkins, who I have known a very long time. And I know this great gathering is sponsored by many wonderful organizations. You all come from all over the country, but it is the 40th anniversary of the Family Research Council. So join me in thanking Tony and everybody with FRC. It's made it such a consequential organization. Tony, I appreciate so very much that introduction. You know, the one I prefer is a little bit shorter. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order, and it is a joy to be back with so many faith-filled, freedom-loving Americans at the Pray, Vote, and Stand Summit. You know, last time I stood before you was back in 2018 as your vice president. It was my privilege to be the very first vice president to address this distinguished gathering, and I want to thank you for giving me a reason to come back to Washington, D.C. from our home in Indiana. You know, Washington, D.C. is a place, if you come with low expectations, you're never disappointed. John F. Kennedy said it well. He said it's a city that combines Southern efficiency with Northern charm. But I'm awful glad you're here. I'm glad to be back. Our life's changed a lot. Karen and I moved home to Indiana. We bought 5 acres and a pond. I got a John Deere riding mower. I got a pickup truck. My son's a captain in the United States Marine Corps who starts in Top Gun just this week. One of my unworthy son-in-law is also a fighter pilot. He's in the United States Navy. Finished Top Gun just last year. Most important thing that's happened in our family, though, is since I've seen most of you last, Karen and I have become grandparents, not once, not twice, but 3 times over, the most beautiful granddaughters ever born in the history of the world. I mean, what are the odds of that? So we've been incredibly blessed. But I stand before you today, motivated probably by what brought you to our nation's capital. Stand before you today as a candidate for President of the United States because I believe this country's in a lot of trouble. It's never been more important to stand firm, to vote our values, and to pray. We gather today, America is in crisis. Joe Biden has weakened this country at home and abroad. So we have to decide right here and right now that Joe Biden will never be reelected as President of the United States, and we're going to elect strong conservative leadership to the White House. But you know, every crisis we face is man-made, and that man's name is Joe Biden. It's true. Their gusher of spending launched the worst inflation in 40 years. Wages are falling. Interest rates are rising so fast. Mortgage rates are now at a 22-year high. And anybody that goes and shops at the grocery like Karen and I do knows the cost of living has gone through the roof. Gasoline prices are up 60% after their war on energy. Overall inflation is 16%. And we have the worst crisis at our southern border in American history, with a flood of humanity and fentanyl that's claiming lives every day. And their aggressive Green New Deal agenda using taxpayer dollars to force the American auto industry into electric cars has actually set the stage for 145,000 UAW workers to go on strike today. In the midst of all their failed economic policies, there's a steady assault on our values and attempts to marginalize those of us that believe in traditional moral values and faith. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan has emboldened the enemies of freedom around the world. If there ever was a time that we needed men and women of faith, dedicated to freedom, to come together and resolve that we will win America back, it is today. And the truth is, Americans are losing faith in our institutions, losing faith in each other, losing faith in the future. And I believe at the heart of that crisis of confidence is a crisis at the very heart of our civilization. So I came today to talk to you about the erosion of the traditional family in America. And what, if I have the privilege of being your president, I intend to do about it. I believe there's no greater threat to America's future than the collapse of the traditional family. So I believe we must resolve here and now that we will elect leaders from the White House to the State House who will champion the traditional family without apology. And as your president, I will. But the facts speak for themselves. Today, more young people are delaying having a family altogether. The share of never married adults has tripled since 1980. People are getting married later, having children later in life. Declining U.S. birth rates. Between 2007 and 2019, the number of babies born in America each year fell by 600,000 children. And we'll reflect more in a few moments about the role of abortion in our society. I mean, these are not the signs of a thriving civilization. They are the hallmarks of decline. It's time we started to be honest with our neighbors and friends about that. Now, the radical left believes that the institution of the traditional family is outdated and unnecessary. They routinely demean those of us who put our family and our family values first. Underlying their agenda is a belief that the family is secondary to the state. They believe parents should have no rights in education. They believe the government should supplant the role of the family literally from the cradle to the grave. Don't ever doubt it. I would submit to all of you, there never has been a time when renewing American families has been more urgent. It's the family, and it's at the dinner table where we pass along our timeless values of faith and hard work and integrity and loyalty. I just finished a book with my middle daughter, Charlotte. A little story about our family and how we've been blessed through the years. The title of the book is Go Home for Dinner. Ronald Reagan said, all great social change begins at the dinner table. And Reagan was right. And the truth is, if we want to strengthen America, we have to strengthen the American families. Strong families make strong communities, and strong communities make a strong nation. That's why your willingness to come to our nation's capital today and to hear all the speakers that you hear is of such vital and timely importance. It's also why today I'm unveiling a national pro-family strategy that will put the American family first. A little bit later, or if you lose interest during my speech, you can go to MikePence2024.com and read all about it. But I wanted to come here to the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit and outline a plan to rebuild the American family. It's really in 4 parts. Number 1, we're going to encourage marriage, childbirth, and adoption with national policies in this country. Secondly, we're going to end the radical left's assault on our kids and reject the transgender ideology that's taken hold in our schools. Third, we're going to give parents in every state the right to choose where their children go to school, public, private, parochial, or homeschool. And finally, we're going to restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law in every state in the land. So first and foremost, we're going to stand by two-parent families. We're going to work to make life more affordable. You know, you should be able to raise a family in America on one income if you choose to do so. In the 1980s, you know, it took 40 weeks for the average American to earn enough money to support their family for the year. Now one parent has to work all year long, and that's if they can make ends meet. Under the failed policies of Joe Biden, we've seen inflation waging war on family budgets. I was in Hobart, Indiana, at a gas station not long ago, and a mother with two little ones strapped in the back seat told me that even though her husband had a good-paying job, they had to go to the food bank in town twice a week because gas prices and grocery prices had gone up so much. I mean, we've got a plan to combat inflation. We're going to shut down runaway government spending, put us back on a path of a balanced budget. We're going to make it possible to lower interest rates on mortgages so more young families can live the American dream of home ownership. We'll extend and make permanent the Trump-Pence tax cuts, especially expanding tax relief for middle and low-income families. And right out of the gate, I'll tell you right now, if you're going to be pro-life, you've got to be pro-adoption. We're going to work to make adoption affordable for every family in America. We've got a plan. You know, the truth is the high costs associated with adoptions often discourage prospective families from even thinking about it. I mean, the average adoption in this country costs about what the average income of Americans make every year. And that's got to end. Under our plan, as your president, I will direct the Department of Health and Human Services to consolidate the current web of grants, incentives, direct benefits to a mission-focused goal of making adoption zero cost for every American family. And it won't cost taxpayers a penny. The money's already there. So we're going to strengthen families by reforming government programs. Secondly, we're going to leverage the power of the executive branch, appointments to our courts and Congress to protect our kids from the radical transgender ideology taking hold in our schools. Yeah, I'll never forget listening to Joe Biden give his first State of the Union address, where he pledged to protect the God-given right of boys to compete in girls' sports. As your president, I promise you, we will end the left's assault on women's sports and demand that participation in women's sports is only to those for their gender assigned at birth. And on day one, I'll reverse Joe Biden's policies that promote transgender child procedures and surgeries everywhere in America. And we will block federal funds to any hospital or healthcare provider that conducts surgical or chemical reassignment on children under the age of 18. We've got to protect our kids. Instead of encouraging the tragedy of this broken ideology, we ought to be teaching our kids that they're fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and not abandon them to the self-loathing ideology of the American left. Thirdly, we'll recognize that families don't co-parent with the government, and we will restore parents' rights in education in every state in You know, I can honestly say I was for educational choice before it was cool. Indiana had one of the first school choice programs in America. So if I get to be your president, we're going to shut down the Federal Department of Education. We're going to board it up. We're going to send all the money back to the states so they can expand educational choice for every parent in America. And finally, our plan. If I have the privilege of being your president, I promise you we'll stand every day without apology for the sanctity of human life. You know, I'm not new to the cause of life. Some of you have known my career in the past. As a congressman, I actually authored the first legislation to defund Planned Parenthood. As governor of Indiana, I signed legislation that banned abortions for race, gender, or disabilities that went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And I will tell you that I couldn't be more proud to have been vice president in an administration that appointed the 3 justices that comprised the majority that sent Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history where it belongs. So if I have the privilege of being your president, I promise you we'll end taxpayer funding of abortion at home and abroad. We'll continue to appoint those strong judges and justices that will uphold our God-given right to life. And on day one, I'll direct the Department of Defense to stop using taxpayer dollars to undermine pro-life laws in states around the country. Senator Tommy Tuberville is right and the Pentagon is wrong. And on the cause of life, I promise you, if I have the privilege of being your president, you'll have a champion for the unborn in the Oval Office. I'll work with states around the country to advance the strongest possible protections for the unborn in one state legislature after another. But we won't stop there. I truly do believe the time has come for a minimum national standard that would ban abortions after the point that an unborn child can experience pain. We need a 15-week national standard to protect unborn children in California, in Illinois, in New York, and in Democrat-led states. I think the fate of our nation is tied up in the cause of life. Save the babies, and we'll save America. If America is to survive, we have to strengthen our families and stand by the cause of life. We have to stand up for families. And all of you, as you're doing today, have to continue to prepare to vote for men and women who share your values without apology. You know, the most important decision I ever made in my life happened on a hillside on a rainy night in 1978. I was a freshman in college, and I traveled with some friends down to a Christian music festival in the early days of contemporary Christian music. The festival took place at a place called Asbury University. It's been much in the news in the last year. I remember sitting on that hillside, having walked away from the faith of my youth, having lost interest in religion, and it was like I heard the words for the first time, that God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whoever might believe in him might not perish, but might have everlasting life. And I remember being moved to stand up, not out of a sense of just being convinced in my mind, but because my heart was broken by what had been done for me on the cross. And I walked down on that rainy night, found a young pastor, and accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And it changed my life forever. So as we gather today and we speak about who it is for whom we will vote and that for which we will stand, I'd encourage each of you to remember to pray. Remember that the effective and fervent prayer of a righteous person availeth much. to not be anxious about anything, but in everything, in these anxious times, by prayer and petition to present your request to God. A request to restore this country, to restore the family, to restore the foundation that seems to be crumbling underfoot every day. And if you'll do that, I know that the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds. You'll be able to carry from here a determination and a resolve to pray and to stand and to vote over the next year and a half in such a way that will bring about that change. My fellow Americans, my fellow conservatives, I want to encourage you to do all of the above, to stand and to vote and to pray. And know that I and my little family, we don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. And we'll be there with you every step of the way until we win America back to everything that's always made us prosperous and strong and free. And we build it on a foundation of faith and freedom. So help me God. Thank you very much.
Started. Our next speaker is a crowd favorite around here. In fact, I was just thinking, last time we were together on the same stage, we couldn't have timed this better. It was 15 minutes after the Dobbs decision was released, and I was interviewing him on stage, and we spent the entire time talking about what the world would look like in a post-Roe world. Dr. Ben Carson needs a little introduction. But I'm going to give him one anyway. He's recently served as the 17th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Trump administration. I'll tell you, I worked with him, met with him in his office many times, took pastors in to pray with him. But even in that position, he found a way to include the faith community to begin addressing one of the crises in America. He is driven from his faith. He is a sage-con. He is engaged because of his faith. Of course, for nearly 30 years, he served as the director of the pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Children's Center. In 1987, he successfully performed the first separation of twins conjoined at the back of the head. Today, now he and Candy could have gone off and enjoyed retirement, but no, he loves America. He is the founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute, where he launched Little Patriots, a free online learning platform that teaches kids American history, civics, and values. At a time when the world is in a hurry and the news keeps us in an emotionally charged state, the bedside manner of Dr. Carson is still unnerved. It provides a deep well of wisdom that our nation desperately needs to draw from. Please welcome our friend, Dr. Ben Carson.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful to be here with you again. And don't you like the theme, pray, vote, and stand? So vitally important right now at this juncture in our country. Now, before I go on any further, You know, these days everybody likes to make disclaimers. They say, you know, I'm on this board, I serve with this group, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Well, I have a disclaimer, and it is that I am not politically correct. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm mean or try to insult people, because I don't. I go out of my way not to do that. But I also found out that it's not worth tying yourself into a little pretzel so that you don't offend anybody, because today people are offended so easily. Have you noticed that? It's just crazy. And, you know, when I was a kid, they had a saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt. I don't think the kids know that anymore. They don't teach that to them anymore. They say, if somebody says something to you, go to your safe space, you know? The whole thing has changed. But we can't let it change too much, because freedom of speech is such an important part of the American dream. And have you noticed that America is the only country that has a dream? There's no French dream. There's no Portuguese dream, no Nigerian dream, no Canadian dream. The Canadians thought they had one until recently, but we're the only ones. We're the only ones who actually have a dream, that shiny city on the hill. And how many people are trying to denigrate our country and say what a horrible place it is? What do they know? I mean, my wife and I have been to 68 different countries. We've lived overseas. And I can guarantee you that there is no place that compares with our country. It is the best place in the earth. And it's our job to maintain that dream for others. You know, a lot of people have given up on the dream. They say, I just want to survive. Because of all the things that are going on in our country right now. It's the same country, the same people, but we have had injected into our midst some who want to fundamentally change our country. And that is a big, big issue. But my American dream was to be a doctor. It was the only thing that interested me as a little kid. I loved anything that had to do with medicine. Dr. Kildare, Dr. Casey, man. I was all over that stuff. And I even liked going to the doctor's office. I mean, I would gladly have a shot just so I could smell the alcohol swabs. You know? Well, maybe not a COVID shot. But obviously, if you're going to be a doctor, you got to go to medical school. And I was a terrible student. I was the worst student you could imagine. Everybody called me horrible names. They teased me all the time. I admired the smart kids, though. And there was one kid, his name was Steve. He was the smartest kid in the class, and he wanted to make sure you knew that. After a test, he'd come up to you and hold his A in your face and say, let me see yours, let me see yours. You want to let him see it, all right. But you'd get into trouble for that. But, you know, my mother was such an amazing person. She believed in me when nobody else did. And she was always saying, Benjamin, you're much too smart to bring home grades like this. I brought them home anyway, but she was always saying that, you know. And, you know, she was encouraging. She had had less than a third grade education herself. And she prayed to God for wisdom because she wanted us to have a different life. And she knew that it was surrounding education because the homes that she cleaned as a domestic, they had a lot of books. And she noticed that they read a lot of books. They didn't watch a lot of TV. So she came home and imposed that on me and my brother. And we were not happy campers. I mean, in today's world, we would have called social services. They probably would have led her away in handcuffs, you know. But we had to read the books. And I didn't enjoy that at all, at first. But after a while, I actually began to enjoy reading those books. Starting reading about entrepreneurs and innovators and explorers and surgeons and scientists. And as I read their stories, it became very clear to me that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is you. It's not somebody else. It's not some circumstance. I stopped listening to all of those people who were saying, you can't do it. The situation is difficult for someone like yourself. There are too many obstacles. And also my mother was an incredible person. She never made excuses, no matter what was going on, and she never accepted excuses from us. And if we ever had an excuse, the very next thing out of her mouth was a poem called Yourself to Blame. And we didn't want to hear that poem. So we stopped making excuses. I think that was a very cool thing. But I got to the place where I was just reading. If I had 5 minutes, I was reading a book. And in the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class, much to the consternation of all those people who teased me and called me dummy. And I remember going up to Steve after a test, and I said, Steve, how'd you do on the test? And he poked out his chest. He said, I got a 91. I said, well, gee, that's too bad. I got 100. And I said, next time if you need help, let me know. Now, I was probably a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good to say that that's turkey. But you know what? I had the exact same brain when I was at the bottom of the class that I had at the top of the class. What does that tell you about potential? We are made in the image of God, and God is no dummy. He gave us these amazing brains that remember everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard, can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. The human brain is the most amazing thing in the universe. And yet, have you noticed how there are forces in our society today that are trying to take advantage of that developing human brain? They're trying to take advantage of our children. You know, the brain develops incredibly rapidly after conception. Hundreds of thousands of neurons every single day. And the brain continues to develop into the mid to late 20s. So that's the reason that someone who's 15 years old doesn't get a driver's license. They don't quite process things the way that a fully mature individual does. The more mature they get, obviously, the better they process things. But can you imagine taking advantage of grade school children whose brains haven't developed, who are very suggestible and very curious, and then you go up to them and tell them you may not be a girl or a boy, and it has a much bigger impact on them than it would on somebody who has a mature brain. That's the very reason that God gave children parents, to protect them. And you know, some people think that all of this is of recent origin, all of these crazy things that are going on in our society. But it's been going on for a while. I want to read you something that comes from the Congressional Record. January the 10th, 1963. We're talking more than 60 years ago. These are the remarks of the Honorable A.S. Herlong, Jr. of Florida. And these are the current, at that time, communist goals for America. Number 15, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Seems like they've done a good job there. Number 17, get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks. Number 20, infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, motion pictures. Think about that. Number 32, support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics. Number 40, discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. Does any of that stuff sound familiar? This is all the things that are happening in our society today. We think we won the Cold War, but they had a longer plan. And that's why Khrushchev said to Eisenhower, your grandchildren's children will live under communism, and we won't have to fire one shot. We see it happening all around us. And it's very important, I think, for the American people to recognize that we're being played. And we are not each other's enemies. But there are those who are making us think that we're each other's enemies by driving wedges between us on the basis of race, income, age, gender, political affiliation, religion, you name it. Drive the wedge, make them enemies, destroy their society. Fix it so that everybody will say, this system doesn't work, therefore we need something else. That, I believe, is the reason that we have all of these district attorneys who are funded by nefarious sources, who are allowing horrendous things to happen in our society so that everybody will say, this doesn't work. And we'll have other people saying, we got to get their guns. You know, there's too much criminal activity with the guns. Don't they realize that that's a violation of the Second Amendment? And people say, think about this, they say, you don't need a high-powered weapon for deer hunting or for duck hunting. How many times have you heard that? That just tells you they don't understand what the Second Amendment is. It's not about deer hunting, it's about being able to protect yourself from an overly aggressive government. That's what people need to understand. But the other issue that is so serious is the educational issue. Some of you probably saw the report about 5 months ago, the Baltimore schools. They were following 23 public schools in Baltimore, assessing them for children who could perform math at grade level, elementary, middle, and high schools. Out of thousands of kids that were assessed, the number who could perform math at grade level, 0. And it's not unique to Baltimore. We're seeing this across the country. But you know what? This is not a new phenomenon. This has occurred historically in other countries too, particularly before they became socialist and communist countries. It's called dumbing down the population. Because if people are ignorant, it's easy to tell them anything. You've probably seen some of those man on the street interviews, haven't you? Where they ask them just basic stuff like, who fought in the Civil War? And they're like, France? I mean, they have no idea. It must hurt to be that ignorant. But the fact of the matter is, people can tell you anything when that's the case. Someone could come up to you and say, Bidenomics really works. And you're actually better off than you were before, and your dollar actually goes further. You gotta be pretty stupid to believe that, you know? But that's why you dumb people down. You can tell them there's no problem at the border, even though there are thousands, if not millions, of people streaming across, some of whom are dangerous people, some of whom are terrorists. I mean, if Iran, who thinks that we're the great Satan, is not sending its operatives through those open borders to wreak havoc upon us, then they would be guilty of terrorist malpractice. I'm sure they are sending people over here to deal with that. But you know what it's going to require for us to get back on the right track? Courage. It's going to require us to understand what our history is. This is a country that was founded on Judeo-Christian values and principles. Our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, says that our rights come from God and not from government. And it is us. If our system is going to be fixed, it is going to be we the people. The government's not going to fix it, because the governments do what governments do. Our founders knew that. Benjamin Franklin and the whole group, they studied every governmental system that had ever existed. And what they discovered is that no matter how they start, no matter how benign they are, they all migrate to the same place: growth, infiltration, and domination. That's what they do. And that's why they work so hard to give us a constitution that would prevent that from happening in this country. And it's important that people understand what that Constitution is, the rights that it provides for us. And we have to hold people's feet to the fire, and we have to vote the right way. We can't continue to vote irresponsibly. People go into the voting booth and they just look for the name that looks familiar. It could be Satan. In some cases it is. And they just keep putting those people in office, you know. That's not responsible voting. And people have to hold officials' feet to the fire. You can't let people say, well, you can monitor the voting, but you have to be way over there where you can't see what's going on. Or the signatures don't have to match, or the addresses don't have, you can't just accept that. You know, we have to be vigilant, and we have to protect the integrity of the process. That's the role of the people. And we have to be courageous. And where does courage come from? It comes from God. And think about Fort McHenry in the War of 1812 when the British were there. And they said, we're going to knock that fort down and we're going to get that flag down. And the bombs were bursting in air and their rockets were going, and they thought they were going to win. But our soldiers were so determined. They worked so hard, they did not let that flag go down. The British finally gave up and went home. That's who we are as Americans. And we must remember, if we're going to be the land of the free, we must also be the home of the brave. Thank you. God bless you all.
He never disappoints. And when he talks, I don't need a second opinion. Dr. Carson always nails it. You know, he was talking about the congressional record 60 years ago. Well, let's fast forward to this year, State of the Union address. Turn your attention to the screen.
Here in the People's House, it's our duty to protect all the people's rights and freedoms. Congress must restore the right that was taken away in Roe v. Wade and protect Roe v. Wade. The Vice President and I are doing everything to protect access to reproductive health care and safeguard patient safety. Well, already more than a dozen states are enforcing extreme abortion bans. Make no mistake about it. If Congress passes a national ban, I will veto it. It's also passed the Bipartisan Equality Act to ensure LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender young people, can live with safety and dignity.
That is why we pray, we vote, and we stand. As was talked about this morning, there is really an unholy trinity with this administration. It is abortion, it is the perversion of the minds of children with the LGBTQ, and climate. That is everything they are focused on, to the detriment of the American family. Well, our next speaker, I hope you are ready to get a little exercise, because he is going to bring you to your feet. After a 2018 speech that he gave before the Greensboro Council in support of the Second Amendment, and that went viral, Mark Robinson was catapulted from life as a factory worker all the way to becoming the first black lieutenant governor of North Carolina. As a child, Mark was the 9th of 10 children, and he grew up in extreme poverty. His father was an alcoholic who routinely abused his mother. However, his mother was a woman of strong faith in God. And Mark credits her with cultivating a foundation for his Christian faith. During his time in office, Lieutenant Governor Robinson has stood out as a vocal supporter of the rights of parents and of children. In fact, he has enlisted the efforts of parents all across North Carolina to expose the indoctrination that is happening in public education in North Carolina, and other state officials in other parts of the country have followed his example. Please welcome Lieutenant Governor Robinson.
Thank you. We appreciate that warm welcome. So right off the bat, we're going to get right off to this. Very first thing we're going to do, we're going to thank our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, for those of y'all that don't know me, I do that every time I speak to a group. Every time I speak to a group, I do that. Yesterday, I spoke to a small group of business people in Charlotte, and I did not do that. And I was kicking myself the entire time afterwards. People think that I come on stage and say, I'd like to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because I want people to look at me and think I'm some pious guy who's always had it together, never done anything wrong, and never made any mistakes. I'm looking at a crowd of people right now who have not always gotten it wrong just like I have made mistakes just like I have. And all of you all know the reason why we call on Jesus Christ and proclaim his name is because we need him, because in order to overcome our problems, we need to call on him on a daily basis. And we need to give him thanks for what he has given us. What has he given us? I want you to take a look at this nation that we live in right now called the United States of America. I'm not one to put words in God's mouth by any stretch and I do not want to be blasphemous, but I truly believe that God has blessed this nation for a reason. And this is the reason I believe he's blessed this nation. I believe he has blessed her because our founders had the audacity to sit down and pen these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why is that so important? Because for the first time in world history, there was a government structure that actually gave credit to God Almighty for what He gives us. Because our rights don't come from kings. They don't come from a Congress or a parliament. They come from God Almighty. The men that crafted that document, you know, they did it. Listen to this. They crafted a document called the Declaration of Independence before they were independent. Signed it, sealed it, and delivered it to the most powerful king on earth. Before the king said they were free, they declared themselves to be free. That is audacious. That is courage. That is where we come from. And I believe that's why God heard from heaven and said, you know what, this nation's got some problems. I know they got some problems. They got slavery. I know they got some inequalities and they got some struggles, but I can get behind this nation. And at every turn, I will be there to make sure that whatever problem they face, they will come through. And you know, He has. He's been right there with us, holding our hands the entire time. Why? Because there's still a regiment of people in this nation holding on to His hand. Right here in this room, this summit that we're at right now, what we believe in as patriotic Americans who believe in God. Patriotism is not dead. Faith is not dead. And you can best believe God is not dead. And He's still at work in America. The question is, will you allow Him to work through you? Now notice what I said. I didn't say with you. I don't work with God. That's above my pay grade. I work with the state of North Carolina for the people of North Carolina. But we don't work with God. He's not our co-pilot. I don't know about you, but if God's in the house, I want Him driving whatever it is I'm on. That'd be kind of like saying, hey, Mike, come on, Michael Jordan, come on, be on our basketball team, but sit on the bench. It's not how it works. Will you allow God to work through you? And this is what I mean. Let's look at what this nation is facing right now. Look at what she's facing. We've got a wide open border right now. Why? We have a wide open border right now because we have a government structure that is more concerned with using our soldiers as social experiments than they are with making sure that you and your families and our nation are protected. Instead of being on the southern border, we've got our soldiers right now focusing on things like how to transition from a man to a woman, how to use he, them, she, and it, how to, 100 other liberal ideologies that they got out there trying to get our soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines to follow. And so our southern border is wide open. We're left unprotected. What God has given us in the men and women who protect this nation is incredible. It is an incredible and storied history of courage. You think about those folks who stood on Bunker Hill. You think about those folks who stood at places like Gettysburg. You think about those Marines on Iwo Jima, those soldiers at D-Day. You think about those magnificent firefighters on 9/11 and policemen on 9/11 and first responders on 9/11. And you think about the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands who signed up and volunteered to go to places like Iraq and Afghanistan to fight the terrorists there, to lose their lives there, to lose their limbs there so that those terrorists would not come here. This story has a great history of courage, but yet we have a federal government right now that is laying down like a lapdog and allowing our southern border to remain open and refuses to use what God has given her in the strong men and women of courage who are ready to defend this nation. You know, I told somebody this. If I was the governor of Texas, I'd get on the phone and I'd make 2 phone calls. First phone call I'd make would be to my National Guard and to my state troopers. And I said, guys, I need you to come on down here. We're going down to the border. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to defend it. We're going to defend it. And I've already called South Carolina, and I've already called Florida, and I've already called Tennessee. And just like in the days of the Alamo, they're sending some boys and girls down here that's going to help us defend it. My next call would be to Joe Biden. And I get on that phone and I say, Joe, this is the governor of Texas. We're down here defending the border. You have 2 choices. You can come down here and come and help us, or you can come down here and go to shoot at us. What's your pleasure, sir? Because if you won't do your job, I'll do your job, because somebody has got to get the job done. Those folks that say, you can't skip over that, you can't change the course of this or that. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And it calls for strong men and women to stand up and do what's necessary to protect this nation, just like those who came before us did before us. The spirit of the Alamo needs to come back to Texas. The spirit of the Alamo needs to come back to America. Talking about things that God has blessed us with. You know, the United States of America has more fuel under her feet than any other nation on earth. But currently, the current administration has us begging like paupers to nations that despise us to fuel ourselves. There's people running around here talking about electric cars and end oil and all of this foolishness. Don't realize something. They don't realize something. God blessed us with that oil for a reason. I want you to think about this. Imagine if the United States of America was drilling for oil every place we have, Anwar, Gulf of Mexico, off the coast of North Carolina, and anywhere else we got. We were getting it out of the ground, just getting out of the ground as fast as we can. We do it better than anybody else in the world. Imagine what it would be like if we were fueling our allies in Europe. Do you think Vladimir Putin would have had the nerve or the ability to make war on Ukraine? Do you think the Chinese would be as bold as they are? They would not, because America would be what it's supposed to be, what God wants her to be, which is the leader of freedom in this world. But we refuse to use what God has given us because we're adhering to unwise counsel. Those who believe in what is colloquially called climate change. I have tried over and over again to explain to these people about climate change. It happens 4 times a year. Right now it is summer. Soon it will be fall. Then it will be winter. After that it will be spring. And then the cycle starts over again. That's the only climate change that I believe in. Certainly, we know that our globe shifts and there are cycles of warming and cooling, but they've happened since the beginning of time, apparently. Well, other ice ages that happened, I don't think any dinosaurs were going, look, and there's an Eastern airliner up there flying over us. Hey, that guy that killed Bob, he was driving an SUV. Everything the climate change agenda has told us in the last 30 years, every prediction they have made has not come come true. Why? Because you know, I know, God Almighty has his hand on this world. And there are mysteries on this earth and in this universe that you and I will never understand. Should we be good stewards of the earth? Absolutely. But should we run our agendas and form our policies on pseudoscience? Absolutely not. One of the most dangerous things in this world right now is that this adherence, the way the Western world is bowing down to the climate change agenda. Notice the nations it is destroying. England, France, Germany, and Italy. Nations that for decades have stood up for freedom and what's right in the world. And the crown jewel in all of it that they want to bow down and be the weakest is the United States of America. The strongest one out there. You know, I guarantee you right now, let the Chinese come over here and take over the United States of America. The first thing they're going to do is head up there to Anwar and get that oil out of the ground. Go down to Mexico, get that oil, the Gulf of Mexico, and get that oil out of the ground. We need to start getting that oil out of the ground right now. Now. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, not in 2 years. You know, I told somebody, all these people arguing about being president. All these people arguing about being president. I want to be the president. No, I want to be the president. Now, if you want to get something done, get a woman. Yeah, I'll get a woman. I just won't get you. Belly aching, standing on stage trying to throw zingers. Meanwhile, our future and our children's future are going down the drain. Now is not the time for weak-kneed politicians with sticker-book smiles. I need a warrior in that White House. I need somebody who's going to stand up and declare the truth. I need somebody that's going to shut down that border and make us energy independent. Somebody that's going to rebuild our military. Somebody who's going to walk onto the world stage and say, I'm from the United States of America, and I'm not here to be your tail. I'm here to be the head. I'm here to lead, and I'm here to lead for freedom and for what's right. I don't want to hear one more weak-kneed politician. Well, do you think they ought to be prosecuting President? I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. I want George Washington. I want Thomas Jefferson. I want Sam Houston. I want Davy Crockett. I want General Patton to come back. I want those people that will stand up and declare to the world, we're not afraid of you. I want people that are willing to look at the media. Yeah, the media. Do we have any of those guys in the house today? ABC, CBS, NBC, you in here? Do you hear me? I don't fear you. I don't fear you. You want my head, come and get it. You want my head, you come and get it. I consider it to be an honor to have a head to give for my country. And I'll gladly do it. Why? Because somebody was willing to give their head, their life for me. I look back over the history of this country. Sometimes it brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. Young men, young women who were willing to risk all for concepts they didn't understand, like independence, liberty, barely understood what it was about. But in their mind's eye, they could see a better day in this country for their families, and for their friends, and for future generations. Young men and women that fought the cataclysm of our Civil War, stood on the fields of Fredericksburg and Gettysburg, stood up at Little Round Top. People who stood in places like Iwo Jima. Young men who rode on Higgins boats across the English Channel. Left home, left the farm, left the job, left the family, left mama, left daddy, left their wives, left behind everything that they loved. Went through all that training, went through all that suffering in basic training, and then went off and learned how to be an infantryman and got equipped and went over to England. Never had children. Never had the pleasures of seeing themselves get old and seeing their grandkids play at their feet. They died on the beaches of France. They died on the fields in Italy, in the mountains of Italy. Died in those places, 100 places in Japan and those islands in Japan. Why? Why did they give up their lives? Those men and women gave up their lives so that I could stand here right now today. And as bold as they were, standing in combat to give their lives, that's how bold me and you need to be today. We need to stop being afraid. We need to stop being nervous. We need to stop being afraid that somebody's not going to like us. You know, there's some people, I want them to not like me. Soon as you tell me, Mr. 257 genders, that believe our children should be reading pornography, as soon as you tell me you don't like me, I figure God is well pleased as I am. I'm right over the target. I get accused all the time. People say, you know, you might not want to say that because people will think you are crazy. You know, somebody told me the president had transgender strippers on the White House lawn. It does not get any crazier than that. I digress. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. When you think that there are individuals who think that it's okay for drag queens to read to small children at your public library. When you think that there are people that think that it's all right for children to be sexually mutilated. When you think that it's okay for our border to be wide open and for you and me to be to not be secure. And when you think that we should not be using what God has given us to enrich us and make our lives better. Yeah. Yes, it does indeed get crazier and crazier as times go on. But we need to be the leveling agent. How do we do that? We do it the same way Dr. Carson was talking about. It's time for us to get a spine. It's time for us to stiffen that spine. It's time for us to stand on the courage that those men who crafted that declaration stood on. They knew that by signing that document and sending it to the king, they were potentially signing their death warrant. But they knew what they believed in. They moved ahead. And the legacy that they've left us is courage. Will you join them in that legacy? I know I'm ready to join them. Let's be courageous and save America, guys. God bless y'all all. God bless the great state of North Carolina. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Baby, what do you say we just did it?
Okay, was I telling you the truth? You know, and God is continually raising up men and women of great conviction. And we're going to actually see that here in just a moment in our next panel that we're going to discuss. But I wanted to take a moment. You know, Mark made reference to our military, talked about our military, what's happening in our military today. And oftentimes, you know, the press and the left want to say, oh, you're just making up all this. These are woke tales. This isn't really happening. I want you to turn your attention to the screen. This is an official, now this is not from Saturday Night Live. This is an official Navy training video.
Hi, my name is Johnny and I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, and I'm Conchi and I use she, her pronouns.
And we're here to talk about pronouns. But what would I do if I misgender someone?
I think the first thing to recognize is that it's not the end of the world. You correct yourself and move on, or you accept the correction and move on.
Oh, thank you for telling me that.
This is why we pray, this is why we vote, and this is why we stand. Well, this indoctrination, you would think that they had accomplished enough of their indoctrination in our public schools, but now they're doing it in our military. There is no place, there's no safe space in America for non-indoctrination. And for the last 40 years, FRC has been on the forefront of educational issues like supporting homeschooling and school choice. And we've opposed things like the social emotional learning and sexuality, so-called education. But more recently, the nation has been forced to confront an attack on parental rights coming from, of all places, inside the schoolhouse, where there has been an intentional effort to drive a wedge between parent and child, to undermine your ability as a parent and as a grandparent to instill into your child, to pass the baton of values to them. And I am encouraged, so encouraged, by what we've seen happening post-COVID. You know, there were a few silver linings to COVID. One was parents got an inside view of what their children were being indoctrinated with. And as a result, we really had an army of mama bears who have stepped forward and have begun the process. We're not finished yet, but they have begun to take back education in America. And so for our next panel, we're going to take a look at that. Please welcome to the stage the Senior Fellow for Education Studies at the Family Research Council, who served in the Trump administration in the Department of Education, Meg Kilgannon, and our education panel.
It is so great to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much for being here. We're just going to get started because we have so much to talk about. And I know this is an issue that you're all really passionate about. I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Ryan Walters. He's the State Superintendent of Public Education in Oklahoma, first elected in 2022. Previously served as the Secretary of Education in Governor Stitt's cabinet. And for the first 9 years of his career, he was a high school history teacher at McAllister Public Schools. Thank you, Ryan. 3.5 years ago, Sonja Szoch would have been described as a devoted wife, mother of 2, photographer, fitness instructor, and Bible study leader. Today, she is the fearless president of the Chino Valley Unified School District Board. Her journey began when she agreed to answer the call to lead a group of concerned parents who felt that their rights were being marginalized by an existing school board. This group gained voice during the pandemic years, and eventually she ran for school board on a pro-parent platform. She beat the odds and the former school board president in the last election, alongside the help of many in her community. Her top priority is to make certain that parents, not state bureaucrats, determine what is the best interest of children. And this is my favorite part of her bio. Sonja has given her yes to God and will continue to stand in the gap. Now, I know that you all remember Quisha from her viral moment at our 2021 Pray Vote stand out in Loudoun County, but I will introduce her anyway. Quisha King is the parental rights and education freedom activist. She's the founder of Action Up America, a grassroots organization that focuses on organizing against CRT and gender ideology, and she's a homeschooling mom of 2. All right. So back in 2021 at that Pray Vote Stand Summit, we were putting out the call. We had just been through the pandemic, and we were putting out the call. We need Christians to run for school board. We need Christians to run for local office. And isn't this wonderful to see examples of the kind of results that we can get? We've got very red Oklahoma, very blue California, and the free state of Florida, all right here, where really exciting things are happening. So I am going to start with Ryan, and I will confess to being a big fan of his. He's always, going hot on Twitter, or for X, whatever we're calling it now. But in spite of my admiration for the many wonderful things you've done, I have to ask you, what is going on with the pedophile principal in Oklahoma City Public Schools?
Well, folks, what we're seeing here is going on in Oklahoma. It's going on all over the country. This is Joe Biden's war on our kids, on our schools, on our faith, on our country. And what we see here is a clear attack to push radical gender ideology in the classroom, destroy American history, and take all rights away from parents. That's what's going on. You guys are seeing it. We're seeing it in Oklahoma. But we are leading the country in how we're fighting back on this. We do. We have a drag queen principal of one of our schools who has now hired another drag queen to work inside our schools. This is what Joe Biden wants for our schools, folks. Well, I have demanded that that individual be fired. No drag queen should be running a school anywhere in this country, especially in Oklahoma. But we have to continue the fight. We have to win this war for our kids' souls, for our kids' minds. And in Oklahoma, what we've done is first, we introduced school choice. Every single child in Oklahoma has school choice. That means the parents can send their kids to a private Christian school, they can homeschool, they can send to a charter school. Folks, if your public school is going to do this, if they are not going to meet the needs of your kids, you need to get your kid and get them into a different school, and we are empowering every parent to do that in Oklahoma. The other thing we're doing, we are very proud. We have the first religious charter school in the country in Oklahoma.
Woo!
This is coming under assault from all these radical leftists and all these legal institutions. You know all of them, all these legal institutions suing against our religious liberties all over the country. But folks, we're not going to back down. As a matter of fact, we're standing even more clear. The Supreme Court has been wrong. There is no separation of church and state in the Constitution or Declaration of Independence. It doesn't exist. So we will bring God back to schools and prayer back in schools in Oklahoma, and we will fight back against that radical myth.
All right. We're going to drill down a little more on some of those here in a minute, but I want to move to Sonja, who is a beacon of hope in the very blue state of California, proving that parents matter everywhere all the time. So tell us about what's going on in California. What prompted you to run?
California prompted me to run. Back 3.5 years ago when the shutdown happened, our kids went on that online program and a lot of things were revealed. My kids have fortunate enough parents that pulled them out, yanked them out, put them into a charter for athletes, but not all kids have that availability. During that time, the kids were supposed to be coming back. I'm still seeing on social media the horrors of what these children are experiencing during this time. A bunch of us parents got together locally. We started a grassroots organization. We started to say, how can we fix this? How can we help this? Provide solutions. But we were shut down with our school district. And then through that, a lot of us parents found out there was a school board. I didn't know what a school board was. I didn't know you had elected officials kind of governing over the school. That's how day-to-day some of us are, and especially in California, we just go through the day, and do our normal things trying to provide for our children. We went through that, got shut down. We saw our school board had a wicked agenda. They were part of the problem. Us moms started to go out into we would fly to Sacramento, drive, whatever we can to start advocating towards these bills, but we knew at that point, learning what the school board was and learning who was behind and kind of puppeteering our school district, who has been amazing, by the way. They were just controlled by wicked things, that we had to flip some seats. We went against some big dogs with a lot of money, The person I ran against had over $150,000 on a school board. You don't even hear that in state elections. Running Fox 11 news commercials, they knew how to run an election. But as parents, we literally united together. We knocked on every single door in that area. And not only did we flip one school board seat, but we flipped two for a 4-to-1 majority that have parental rights. So it can be done. Yes. It can be done. We got sworn in December. January, we hit the ground running. We passed multiple policies that make sense, because common sense is missing in California. And here we are now, because of common sense, being sued by our Attorney General, who is allowing wicked, evil people on the streets, and he's suing us and wasting our taxpayer dollars. But God provides.
Yes.
And he will find and show the way.
Excellent, excellent. So, Quisha, from the free state of Florida, how are people bearing up under this draconian leadership you all are suffering under down there? I read about it all the time in the press, and it seems like it's really, really rough. And then today, I read that, Randi Weingarten again is saying ugly things about parents and mothers. And she called a couple of groups that I know and love the Uptown Klan. I think you might be members of those groups. What's going on with all of that?
Well, I think what they say when they start to call you names, you're over the target. Yeah. And it's funny that they use the word Klan.
Yep.
Oh, is my mic not on? Oh, hello. Is it on now? My mic isn't on.
I was like, do you want mine?
Yay. Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay, there we go. Well, so when they start to call you names, you're over the target, because that's what they do. They smear you. They try to demean you and make other people believe what they're trying to say about you. But it's funny that they use the word Klan, because when you listen to their rhetoric, when you listen to what they actually believe, those who are part of these teachers' unions and the Randi Weingartens, and even the NAACP, who recently put a travel ban in Florida, which is, I don't know. I got a lot of melanin, so I'm doing perfectly fine there. And I know a lot of others are doing perfectly fine, so I don't know what they're talking about. But if you listen to what they actually believe, they are the ones who sound just like the KKK. Mm-hmm. They are the ones that are being racist. They are the ones that are trying to divide our children from each other, divide parents against their own children, and they're constantly trying to make America seem like it's a place that it is not. I don't know about you, but when you go in your grocery store, when you're getting gas, I find that Americans are pretty friendly and pretty, we're always trying to help each other. But the more that they can push that narrative, they can make us believe something that is just not true. And I hope we can get to talk about this, but when you dig into critical race theory, when you dig into the gender critical, these ideologies, they come from Marxism. And I think when we begin to really understand what we're dealing with, it becomes something internalized within us. And so it's not just this thing outside. It is something that we know we have to fight, because they are literally coming for our children, as you guys have said. They're not joking. They're not kidding. They really mean what they say. Yeah. And so we need to take them seriously and continue to stand up and fight back.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to Ryan. So I read, when I Google you, the articles that come up they're pretty upset. Even in Oklahoma, it seems like people are pretty upset, at least the people who are in the media and the people who are in the education establishment there. So they're all pretty shocked that you're going to, are you really going to allow a full 60 seconds of prayer to start the school day in Oklahoma? Is that really happening?
Oh, we absolutely are, folks. And all the right people are really upset. It is unbelievable to me how radical the left has become, folks. So let me tell you what these things are we're doing in Oklahoma. Every school will have a full minute of silence. And if your child chooses to express their religious belief, we are going to protect it. We know that the Judeo-Christian faith was vital in making this the most exceptional country in world history. We will protect that in our schools. The other thing that we are going to continue to do is to lay out this case for bringing God back to school. And notice the reaction from the left here, folks. They are fighting tooth and nail to keep graphic pornography in school, like Genderqueer and Flamer. These are the books they've injected into schools in our state and across the country. But guess what mortifies them? The Constitution, having the Bible in a school classroom. Think about this absurd position that the left has taken on. Folks, the more that they cry, the more that they get this extreme reaction, the more it tells me we're right over the target. The reality is we are going to bring God back to school. We are going to help students understand this is the greatest country in the history of the world. We want you reading the Constitution, and we want an action call. We want all students to know that decline is a choice. America is the greatest country in the history of the world because of our Judeo-Christian values. And you know what? We want all of our children to carry on the path that America is on, to live up to those core fundamental principles laid out in the Declaration. And so we're going to ensure that history is taught in our schools and the teachers' unions are out. Parents in, teachers' unions out.
Okay. So, Sonja, when you all hit the ground running in California, you passed a very controversial measure where your school board voted that parents should be notified if their child starts to have a question about gender or asks to go by different pronouns or changes the name, that if they make this declaration at school outside the parent's knowledge, that the school would be obligated to inform the parent. And now this is another one, if you Google it, you get a lot of crazy stuff going on. So can you tell us what is going on with that, and how do the parents in your county feel about that?
Yeah, so very interesting. I never imagined this would go coast to coast, and actually in other parts of the world are writing about us for notifying parents of something that they should obviously be notified. It was a simple notification policy because we know in California we have some crazy laws that I don't believe are constitutional, but we're going to find the gray areas and challenge them. And this was one of them because we see from our Department of Ed and our unions, they're pushing confusion on our children, right? And not every child is fortunate enough to be able to be pulled out and put into anything, like a private school. But that's all it was. And here we are now being sued for it, but it also gives us hope because if California can come together, we've seen our communities come together. They're supporting us. Despite the multiple death threats that I've received in my family, despite being called every name in the book, you have so much beautiful support, not just from our local community, but all over California, and now all over the nation. So to me, that is going to show when we bring this prayerfully into the higher courts, that we can win something that protects all of our children from coast to coast. Yes. And I think that's going to happen as long as we continue to link together.
Yes. Right. Well, and in a lot of ways, Governor DeSantis sort of started this genre off, right, with the, what do they call it, the Don't Say Gay bill? I think it has a different name, doesn't it? I think it might be actually something.
Education bill?
Yeah, that one, right? How are you guys bearing up under that?
Oh, it's so terrible for a parent to be able to have a say in what their children are shown in school. It's crazy to even have these conversations, to think that you would get so much pushback like you're getting, but thank God that your communities are coming together. I'm so happy to see that, especially in California. When you guys should take a look at our Florida policy so you can, just copy. It's a fantastic, right? And I would advise all of you, if you are involved in the legislature or your leading organizations, take a look at what we have done in Florida. So, it's kind of like the blueprint. And there are so many parents that will support you, but people are scared. They're scared. They're like, oh, Quisha, thank God you're out there, but I'm just too afraid to go out and say these things. But we need to encourage them and help them understand what is really on the line, because maybe your child isn't in a public school or indoctrination camps, as I like to call them nowadays. Many of them are, but they have to live and work around, these children who will grow up and be in the world one day. So it's imperative to all of us that we encourage those who feel like they can't say anything, that they're too afraid, to help them understand what is truly on the line. The next generation of leaders, thinkers, scientists, innovators, those that will keep America being pushed forward. They will be, maybe even a public office, they will be a leader one day. And so we have to make sure that when we hear people kind of like backing up, that they are bold, just like what we're doing in Florida, like Governor DeSantis, just being bold. You have to just kind of keep your head down and shoot for what is right. Because at the end of the day, these are issues that are right and wrong. And there is no way you can convince me that it is right for children to see pornography or for children to be exposed to these explicit materials in classrooms. There's just it is just wrong. And so as a believer, standing on the word of faith, standing on the word of God, we just go forward, because that's what we're called to do.
Great. Well, the thing that I really loved about the Parents' Rights Bill was the age limit. That you said that only children in kindergarten through third grade at the beginning, they started out with kindergarten through third grade would not be discussing sexual orientation, gender identity in the classroom. And this has got to be, I haven't polled it myself personally, but this has got to be an 85-90% issue with people. That the vast majority of people in America can agree that this isn't something that we need to discuss with the very young children. And yet, you saw the meltdown, right? And this is why we have to lead as Christians, because what the left is doing is a top-down imposition of an agenda, of a Marxist and anti-God and anti-family agenda. But what you see on the stage here, behind these three people and behind all of you, are thousands and thousands of other people of faith who believe what we believe and who want to make sure that the children of this country have not their childhood and their innocence robbed from them, but that they are educated and equipped to join American society and to keep this country moving forward.
Meg, if I could, you asked me about the attacks that have come at me. They're not really attacks on me as much as they are attacks on the parents. Right. We have two moms up here that went to fight for their kids. This is the final stage of what the left has been working on for a long time. Create a Department of Education that can be weaponized against parents, okay? There shouldn't be a Department of Education, folks. There shouldn't be one. But they created this department. You've seen this department push Common Core, DEI, critical race theory, now radical gender theory. They partner up with the teachers' unions. They partner up with every radical group in the country to target moms and dads, because it is exactly right. It is the end stage of a Marxist goal to break down the family, to break down society, to create a school system who will only perpetuate a voting bloc for them in the future. That's what ultimately they are trying to do here, is a fundamental reshaping of the country. But folks, just as it says in Esther, there's times it's like, it wouldn't have been amazing to be there with the founders as they crafted the Constitution. But you know what? Like Queen Esther was told, maybe you were born for times like these. All of you in this room, all of you listening, this is that time. The moms, the dads, this is the time for which God created you, to get our country back on track and to end this Marxist plot in its final stage and move the country in the final direction. We are called to do that.
Yes. Yeah. We only have about 5 minutes left, and I have a question for each of you, ladies. So you were telling me in the green room, Sonja, about what you did with your lawyers, because we do our school board boot camps, and once we get the school board members elected, one of the first two questions I get, the first one is, how do I get rid of my general counsel? because the lawyers that are advising the school boards are extremely ideological in a lot of cases. And they are the ones who are telling school board members that they will be sued if they do this, or they'll have a lawfare over that. So how did you handle that?
So when I took the seat and I wanted to bring some policies forward, me and the superintendent, we had a history of mom and superintendent, which wasn't the greatest. And then it came, okay, you see California starting to fire all their superintendents. And I sat and I said, we can have a clean slate, be part of history, be part of protecting our kids, or you can be part of what you see across California, right? And we had a handshake of a no surprise deal. And I think it's very important to partner with people because there's really good people that have good intentions, but they have been pushed and shoved to a corner, and you need to let them know there's people that are gonna stand in front of you. And that's the very first thing I said is, look, I will stand in front of you before they come after you. Mm-hmm. And we have not only said that through our words, but our actions, right? Because they've come after our superintendent. But here's the thing. He told us when I was gonna bring forward a policy, he told the legal said it's illegal. And I said, okay, cool. I'm a soccer mom, don't know very much about law, but I do know, I wanna know what law that we're gonna break, okay? Went on and on. Mrs. Shaw, it's illegal. The JPA says it's illegal. They said it's illegal. And I said, okay, cool, but you give me all these documents and I still don't see a law that's cited. Till this day, Bonta's on the news saying we're doing illegal policies and we're breaking the law, but he can't cite a law. And the judge said it himself. He's trying to make him legislate from the bench, even though they put the injunction on it. So listen to their words. Use their words against them. It doesn't take a genius. I'm proof of that. Anybody can do it. And all that, I mean, really, you guys could do it, I promise. And so eventually, after 4 weeks, Dr. Enfield, where's our law? Mrs. Shaw, guess what? They don't have a law. Ding, 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 time to bring the policy forward, let's go. Because now we know it's not illegal and we're gonna challenge it because there's a gray area. Do not let them always push you into that other side.
The gray area can go our way too.
But I will say, here's where the hope is. California, we spend a lot of money on indoctrinating our kids. Our Department of Ed is focused on the sexualization and the perversion. But where we can come together is our children in California and all throughout the nation. We come together and we protect our kids and we fight hard. California will show the nation, linked arms with you guys, that we can do this, right? We're gonna bring this to Supreme Court, but the little part of the gray law is what's gonna save us. And if we can find those in every single situation, we're gonna win the battle for our kids. We are, there is no doubt in my mind. And I think that's what brings us hope and that's what brings us to fight this fight.
Yes, that's great, that's great. Now, Quisha, I like to think of you and moms and dads, there are dads out there too, moms and dads like you and concerned citizens, even people who don't have kids in public schools. You guys are like the bulwark of protection, the firepower that protects leaders like these when you're active in the community. I love your YouTube channel where you did an undercover investigation of an LGBTQ church event that was targeting kids. Like, what advice would you give? So not everybody can be a Ryan Walters and not everybody can be a Sonja Shaw, although there are lots of you guys who could, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people who can be a Quisha or Meg Kilgannon, just a mom doing the best she can in her community. So what advice would you give to those parents and those grandparents? How can they be more involved?
Well, I would say start talking to your children and your grandchildren. Start there. And we can't just ask anymore, how was your day at school? I don't care where they go to school. If they are out of your sight 5 days a week, 7 to 8 hours a day, you need to probe what exactly is happening behind those classroom doors, because once those doors close, we really have no idea. We're just these are strangers, okay? These teachers are strangers and we do not know who they are. And so probe your children, help them to understand, if age appropriate, help them to understand like what is actually going on. Show them the words, talk to them about the types of language that will be used to indoctrinate them. So when they hear it, they will know, Mom, Dad, red flag, something happened at school today that you need to know about. My daughter has gotten to the point where I'm a homeschool mom, but she'll play videos of like where there might be a lefty going nuts, and she just plays it because she knows it's going to drive me crazy. But that I would rather that, so they know the language, they know exactly what is being out there. These are some of the things that, in a protective way that we don't need to shield them from, but we need to help them understand the lay of the land so they can inform you, and then you can take that to the superintendent. You can take that to your legislators and say, look, this is what is going on.
Yeah, great, thank you. Well, we're out of time, and I just want to close us in a prayer, though, so if you would bow your heads, please. Almighty and eternal God, you created us in your image, and you bid us to seek after all that is good, true, and beautiful, especially as revealed in your word and in your only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Please bless Ryan, Sonja, and Quisha and their families and their work. Bless all those faithful servants they represent who serve you in schools and communities across the nation. We ask you to raise up a powerful force of believers who will obey you, honor parents, protect children, speak truth, and reclaim education in America to advance the kingdom of God. We ask all of this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Meg, can I say something really quick? Sure. Give God your yes every single day. Get on your knees. He'll protect you. And at the end of the day, if you do that, our kids are going to win.
Yes. Thank you. All right.
Wow, isn't that exciting to see what is happening? And that's just a small sample of what is happening all across America. Why? Because you're praying, you're voting, and you're standing. You're making a difference. In fact, you can hear more about the education issue in the 5 o'clock hour. I'll be doing a live broadcast of Washington Watch down the hall. You can follow the signs if you want to join us at 5 p.m. All right, so we're going to transition to our last panel for the afternoon. And it's going to focus on the life issue. The historic Dobbs decision handed down by the Supreme Court on June 24th, 2022 was a major victory for the pro-life movement. One that we fought for 50 years. And what really happened here, there's a spiritual nature, as we've been talking about this. The court literally repented, changed its mind about abortion. But there is much work that still needs to be done. Now, this victory was followed by the 2022 elections, where the Republicans, the party that had worked for decades to protect and defend life, had hoped to gain large margins in Congress, but that didn't happen. Instead, the Republicans barely control the House, and in the Senate, where not all Republicans can be relied upon to vote for protecting life, the Republicans came up short. In Michigan, Kansas, Kentucky, and Montana, pro-life initiatives failed on the ballots. Many claim that the 2022 election was a sign that protecting the unborn is a losing issue for Republicans and therefore should be abandoned. Well, it's never easy to do the right thing. But when you actually look at the numbers tell a different story. And part of our gathering here and the work that we have to do is to encourage those that are in positions to make these decisions to continue to do the right thing for the right reason. So joining me now on this panel to discuss the way forward in this post-Roe world, Congressman Chris Smith, who I'm sure many of you know. He is probably the leading voice for life on Capitol Hill. And He is in his 22nd term representing New Jersey's 4th congressional district. He's the chair of the Pro-Life Commission, the Pro-Life Caucus. He's been that for 37 years. And prior to that, he was the executive director of the New Jersey Right to Life. Then we have Ohio State Representative Jena Powell. She is in her 3rd term representing the 80th District of Ohio. She founded and leads the Ohio Pro-Life Caucus in the House, which will undoubtedly be very much in the spotlight heading into the upcoming session and election. And we have our own Mary Szoch. She is FRC's director of the Center for Human Dignity, and she has a calling to advocate and speak for the unborn and for life. And before joining FRC, Mary served as the director of the D.C. Catholic Conference. She and her husband Ben have 2 children, including a little girl that I just saw her wheeling in the stroller in the back just 1 month ago. So please welcome our panel to the stage. Well, thank you all for joining us today at the Pray Vote Stand Summit. And Congressman Smith, I'm going to start with you. You're to my left here. After the Dobbs decision, I made reference to this at the beginning. There are some that have said, well, you know what? Now that we have Roe is gone, there's no federal role any longer in protecting the unborn life. But that's not consistent with the message that we heard for 50 years.
Exactly. Tony, and first of all, I want to thank you and FRC for the extraordinary job that you do. You are a force. People listen when you speak, and you're very good at strategy. So I can't thank you enough for the leadership that you have provided. One of the, yes, that's...
Thank you, Chris.
My wife and I have been in the pro-life movement since 1972, before Roe versus Wade. I met her in the pro-life movement, and we have always aspired, all of us in the pro-life movement, to someday have a federal protection for unborn children. Yes, have them at the state level as well, but life needs to be protected constitutionally as well as by statute. And the Dobbs decision could not have been clearer, both Alito and Kavanaugh's concurring opinion, that all lawmakers, not just state lawmakers, all lawmakers have a critical role to play with regards to abortion. We write laws, we can regulate it, we can proscribe it, prohibit it, but we need to do it, and we need to step up. I see some folks in Capitol Hill saying, oh, let's leave it to the states. Well, if you leave it to the states, you leave it to places like the state of New Jersey, where Governor Murphy in my state has signed into law a bill that allows abortion right up into the moment of birth. New York did the same, Colorado, California, a number of states have. So it's outrageous to think we're just going to look the other way while children are being dismembered, chemically poisoned in a myriad of ways. And the newest thing, the abortion pill, right, which, as you know, kills the child by starvation. That's how it works. Its operative impact is to kill a baby by starving him or her to death. That is child violence, and we need to stop it on a federal level and every place we can do it on a state.
You have previously introduced legislation working actually with Senator Graham in the Senate on a pain-capable bill, which is, when a child, there's consensus building in this nation. 65% of Americans agree when a child can feel pain in the womb, sucks its thumb, that at least that should be a minimum nationwide. But what you're proposing does not say that states cannot go further.
Exactly.
It's simply saying that we're not going to be in league with North Korea and China. We're going to be a country that at least has a bare minimum for protection, given that we have states like California, New York, and New Jersey.
There's no doubt. And a 15-week ban, or even the legislation that Mike Kelly has introduced, the heartbeat bill, which I'm a co-sponsor of, that legislation preempts states like New Jersey and New York. If we had a 15-week ban, which is not what I want, we want more protection for
But we've had consensus building in the nation.
And there is consensus being built. The fact that a child can feel excruciating pain as they're being dismembered, especially during the early moments of that abortion, it's outrageous. It underscores the violence that's happening. And a 15-week ban would, if it was in the states like New Jersey. We believe it would save at least 55,000 children from the horror of that later term abortion. And I do see it as a step, and only a step.
And it's how we got to where we are today.
Oh, without a doubt. The Dobbs decision was based on,
process.
as you know so well, a 15-week ban.
Yeah. Jen, I'm going to skip over you just a moment. I'm going to go Mary, because I want to continue this conversation about the 2022 elections where, post that election, people are saying, oh, it was a losing issue for Republicans. But not if you talked about it the right way, not if you embraced it. It was when you ran from it that it became a problem for you.
Right, and I think if we look at states like Texas and Florida, we can see that in those states, strong pro-life legislation was enacted, but people spoke clearly about what we want to do with pro-life legislation. Pro-life legislation isn't any sort of restriction. It's a protection for a person who I got to meet 6 weeks ago when I gave birth to my little one, a minute before she was born in states like California and New Jersey. She could have been aborted. And that is what we're trying to protect, that little baby who oohs and ahs and has just started to smile, thank goodness. And so we can see that when our legislators speak with clarity, and when they talk about what the goal is, what they're trying to do, pro-life legislation is a winning issue because Americans love babies. All you have to do is walk down the street with my stroller, and you can see that everyone in America is inherently pro-life. You can't see a baby and not smile.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's just a matter of what we've been doing for 50 years, continuing to do. This is a baby. It's not a calculation of weeks. It's a baby that feels pain, sucks its thumb. We've got pictures on our refrigerators of these babies. It's life, and we need to protect it. Jen, I'm going to talk to you for a moment about Ohio in particular, because actually Ohio, Governor DeWine was one of about a dozen governors who had signed very strong pro-life legislation, ran for re-election, won overwhelmingly, didn't run from the issue, but yet November the 7th, we had a ballot initiative in Ohio dealing with the life issue, and it failed. What's happening in Ohio?
So when Governor DeWine ran, that's when I first started running for office as well. It was very interesting because Governor DeWine ran on signing in Ohio's heartbeat bill. Right before that, there'd been an issue with getting it signed into law, overriding the veto and all that. And that was his number one thing that Governor DeWine ran on. He said, if the bill comes to my desk, I will sign it into law. And by the grace of God, we moved it through the legislature and it was signed into law in our state. Which really told us that Ohioans are overwhelmingly pro-life. The science is crystal clear that life does begin at conception, and Ohioans know that, believe that, and that's what they voted into office. Unfortunately, this November, we do have a citizen-led ballot initiative taking place that is happening this November. It's extremely scary because it would make Ohio the second most liberal state in the nation for abortion rights, and that is not where Ohioans stand. And unfortunately, what's happening is out-of-state billionaires, Planned Parenthood is spending so much money in our state and is lying to Ohioans, and they're confusing the issue. And so what we're trying to tell Ohioans is that this extreme measure that is on the ballot is not what the left is trying to portray. It's extreme, and it's not only about killing unborn children up until the very time of birth in our state, it's also a big issue about parental rights in our state. So that's why we're really urging people to vote no on issue 1 in our state.
Yeah, I kind of mixed up the issues there because there was just a ballot initiative in Ohio in August that dealt with raising the threshold on constitutional amendments, and I kind of mixed up the two issues there. But that was the one, that was kind of the battle that millions of dollars were flowing into the state to make this an issue about abortion when it was actually about the state constitution and who would decide, who could manipulate the constitution. But it's all about that November ballot initiative. Where do we see things going in Ohio?
Absolutely. So in August, we did have a special election. And what that special election said was it was raising the constitutional threshold from 50% to 60% to change our state's constitution. And what we saw in August was out-of-state billionaires, Planned Parenthood coming in and totally confusing the issue. And unfortunately, that did fail in August. What we're really seeing in Ohio is that led to the November ballot. Because nationwide, what we're seeing is states that constitutions that are easy to change through citizen-led initiatives. All of these organizations are targeting those states to come in and change the Constitution to enable abortion to be in the Constitution for life in that state, which really goes around the legislature and really harms women and children in that state holistically.
So what are you hearing on the ground right now in Ohio?
You know, what we're really trying to do is get out the word specifically on issue 1. We're trying to tell Ohioans what's really taking place in the November ballot initiative, what the reality is. The reality is if it passes, it would enshrine abortion in our Constitution up until the time of birth. That is extreme, no matter how you look at it. And that's not where Ohioans stand. We voted in the heartbeat bill not that long ago. Ohioans are for life. And something else to keep in mind, I always tell people this, is that as Republicans, we might not agree on everything, right? There might be tax issues we disagree on, but Republicans across the board are pro-life. They know that life begins at conception, and we agree on this. Statewide, every office holder is Republican. They've campaigned on these issues. We have supermajority in Ohio in the House and the Senate. These people have campaigned on saying, hey, we believe that life begins at conception, and we're gonna move forward on these pro-life policies. Right. So really the concern in Ohio is that if it passes in November, it's not where Ohioans stand. It's because a lot of money is flowing into our state and confusing Ohio voters. So we're really trying to get out the word of what's happening in November and why people need to understand what's at stake this November.
I mean, Ohio is overwhelmingly pro-life. In fact, the whole Heartbeat Initiative began in the state of Ohio. And as you said, Governor DeWine made this a campaign issue because the previous governor wouldn't do it, and he did it. And Ohio's planted a flag for life. So if you live in Ohio, you need to make sure that you are informing your friends of what's coming up this November on the ballot as it pertains to life. Chris, I want to go, we've talked about this throughout the course of the day, about the Biden administration. They're what I call the unholy trinity of abortion, LGBTQ, and the climate. But in almost every piece of legislation that they push, you just have to look, and you'll find it eventually, is abortion. And this is one of their top foreign policy objectives, is to push abortion. And there's a piece of legislation that was passed about 20 years ago, right after about the time I got here to FRC. It was the PEPFAR. This was to deal with AIDS in Africa. And it was a good piece of legislation to protect lives, but it's been hijacked by the Biden administration. It's up for reauthorization. What is happening with that?
Unfortunately, the President of the United States, who is the abortion president, has integrated abortion into every single solitary policy that he can do it. Even for a state like Ohio, Texas, places throughout the country where there's a heartbeat bill or some other protective statute. He's now ordered his Veterans Administration to use VA health facilities. I used to be chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee. What a gross misuse of the VA and all of those medical centers and the community health centers to turn them into abortion mills. And yet he has ordered that. That was an executive order that went into effect last year. And this is just part and parcel of what he is doing with every single solitary program. And you said you look at any bill or any policy, you don't have to look hard. They are proud of being for abortion till birth. And we talk about some members on the Republican side saying, we just want to do state laws. None of the Democrats have that inhibition or that vision. They passed twice in the last Congress, when they had control of the House, a bill that would allow abortion till birth in every single solitary state, till birth, and would eviscerate every modest protection that we've gotten over the years, like informed consent, women's right to know laws.
And that's what Vice President Harris is talking about when she says we want to codify Roe.
That's what she means.
So it eliminates what Ohio has done.
Exactly, be gone.
Every state.
And if they get the House and the Senate and the presidency, honestly, this filibuster will be gone, and they will impose on everybody here and the entire country the most draconian, anti-life, anti-child policy on the face of the earth. Till birth and nothing, no conscience protection even.
And that includes like parental notification laws.
It's all gone. And it's right in the bill. It's gone. And the World Health Organization is pushing the identical model statute on every country in the world. I read their model legislation. No gestational limits, right till birth. no informed consent. Everything is laid out. It's written just like the one that the Democrats tried to get passed here and got passed. Only the filibuster saved us on the Senate side and some very brave Republicans who stood up. Now, that you asked about PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. I was one of the co-sponsors of it in 2003. The great Henry Hyde, the finest pro-life lawmaker who ever lived, he was the prime sponsor. And the legislation was about going after the pandemic of HIV/AIDS, which was ravaging Africa. So many people were dying, and it worked. It put a tourniquet on it. It's being sustained with mother-to-child transmission drugs and ARVs, all these good things. In comes Joe Biden. He puts out brand new guidance to all of the recipients of PEPFAR, $6.7 billion, and says, you have to now try to change the laws in the countries you're operating under for sexual and reproductive health and rights, which means on the LGBTQ agenda and on the abortion agenda. And they're not trying to protect life, believe me.
Right.
This is Planned Parenthood and all the usual suspects. Unfortunately, we got some people in our party, not many, who are suggesting that let's just pass a 3 or 5 year reauthorization of the program. Well, that just endorses everything that Biden has done. Puts a rubber stamp and says, yep, we're for what he did. And what we're doing, we're trying to get what Trump did to his everlasting credit. President Trump did the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance policy, which was an updated and expanded Mexico City policy that said that any organization that receives federal funds for global health, anyone, they can't perform or promote abortions in those countries, even with their own money. And the idea behind that is if we really care about the unborn child and their mothers, because they're co-victims of abortion, we care just as much about that mom, as you all know, you all do as well. We're not going to say, oh, do whatever you want. Just segregate your accounts a little bit, and you can change the laws of country after country, and they're trying to do it. They're trying so hard to do it. They've succeeded in some instances. We had a close call just recently in Liberia, where the NGOs, just like they do in America, who runs the abortion policies for the other side? Planned Parenthood and company. There was a big push in Liberia to legalize abortion on demand. It has been stalled. I've been very much involved with it myself. And I was told by many of those people, it's all these NGOs coming in and saying, this is what you have to do. And they can prevail. They do it at the state level, and they do it at the federal level. So for us on the Republican side, pro-life side, to give Biden 3 or 5 years, we're going to give him 1 through the appropriations process. Mario Diaz-Balart, God bless him, wrote an excellent foreign aid appropriations bill that incorporates Mexico City and a lot of other pro-life policies. He and our leadership, from Kevin McCarthy on down, are saying, this is what we want, we're going to fight for it.
People just need to realize these are our tax dollars being used to push abortion both here and abroad. Jena, what's the way forward? I mean, we talked about there's a federal role, obviously the states in the really the focus, the spotlight, because of where we are now, that state lawmakers can decide the policies for their state. But it's not just policy anymore. We've got, as you mentioned, all this money coming in to try to tilt the scales. What is the way forward, as you see it in Ohio, that could help other states?
You know, when I first started running for office many years ago, a reporter looked at me and he said, do you think Roe will be overturned in your lifetime? And I remember at the time, the consensus was there's absolutely no way that's going to happen. But I remember I looked at him and I said, absolutely. I absolutely believe Roe will be overturned in our lifetime, because if I didn't, then I shouldn't be running for office and I shouldn't be doing the work to get to the point where Roe is overturned. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I think for a lot of people, it was overturned even quicker than what some conservatives would have even thought. We're at the place in Ohio where it's actually, I think, the first quarter of a post-Roe America. And I think for some people it can be very frustrating to see some states having these citizen-led ballot initiatives where Ohioans are being lied to, where a lot of out-of-state money is flooding in and confusing the rhetoric. Mm-hmm. I think my message to whether you're an Ohioan or American in another state is to say, look, the war is not done. You know, we know that life begins at conception. Gen Z is the most pro-life generation in years. You know, what I would look at you guys who are here today, and I would say is, if you are in another state, you need to make sure and you need to see what the constitutional threshold is in your state. Go back and check that out, because that's something really scary that's happening in Ohio. And you might look and you say, hey, that's Ohio, that's not our state. Well, it's very clear what the left is doing. It's very clear what the abortion movement is doing. They're coming in, they're circumventing the legislature, and they're going straight to the Constitution and trying to change it and lie to Americans in that manner. So go home, see what's going on with your Constitution in your state. And secondly, we have to make abortion unthinkable nationally. You know, so there's a lot of movement in Ohio going, how can we continue lifting up the pregnancy resource centers? How can we allow churches to understand and preach messages on the Bible speaks to pro-life policy. The Bible is pro-life. God loves children, and life does begin in the womb. And so there's a lot of movement just on a community level that if you are in a church, a nonprofit, working in a pregnancy resource center, continue helping with those resources so that we can make abortion unthinkable to the average American. And then on a legislative level, you know, we are continuing working on policy to help the unborn. We're continuing working on ways to ensure that abortion is unthinkable, that it no longer happens in our state. And thankfully, there's I think, a lot of talk in Congress as well, coming in and saying, hey, what does this look like on a national level? Because when we're looking at Indiana and West Virginia, that is pretty much life at conception states that are bordering Ohio. Well, how can we live in a state that, if it passes in November, would allow abortion up until the time of birth, but 1 mile over says, hey, a life begins at the time of conception? So I love to see Congress taking a look at this and having those broader conversations, because we can't live in America where 1 mile over life begins at conception, and in another state allows abortion up until the time of birth. So there's a lot of things that community members can do. Continue supporting women, continue supporting children, help with your pregnancy resource center. There's women and men in your church that don't know that life begins at conception. So continue on that message, because that changes cultures and will change our nation.
It's so important that we not stop what we've been doing for 50 years, having those conversations, educating people, and bringing them to an understanding that this is a child created in the image of God. But I just want to emphasize something you just said, Jen, and that is the deception. Millions of dollars are being used. Now, we shouldn't be surprised, but millions of dollars now are being used to confuse and to deceive the voters. And so you play a key role in that by being informed, by knowing the truth and sharing it. I mean, I think you've heard something throughout this whole day, you're going to hear it more tonight and tomorrow, is that we've got to be bold, courageous, and speak up so that others will know. And Mary, I want to we're going to bring our time to a close here, but the educational aspect of this, about how we talk to our friends, how and we've got a lot of resources at the Family Research Council on the biblical worldview side, but also it's the conversations that we have.
It absolutely is, and I loved what Jena said about this is the first quarter. And when we look at the only other time in history in America where human beings were not classified as persons, when we look at what happened with slavery, it was 100 years before we had the civil rights movement. We need to make sure that it's not 100 years before the unborn child is granted full rights as a person. And that begins with our conversations with our neighbors.
How do we have those conversations with our friends about the humanity of the unborn and our responsibility to protect them, especially in what we would describe as a very polarized society, and especially now? I mean, it is intense. How do we do it?
Well, I think we need to lead with love. And love and listening. You know, if there's two things that you can do, it's first listen to what your neighbors are saying, and then love them in that moment. There's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain behind the pro-abortion position. It's a lot of women who have had abortions, men who have paid for them, men who have supported them, friends who have said, oh, it would be okay. And a lot of these people have later realized, oh my gosh, that was a baby. And that pain is what is driving the violence that we see in the pro-abortion movement.
Yeah.
We need to meet that with love and compassion, and we need to meet that with, hey, we have other solutions for you. There's a better way, because that is a human being, and that human being deserves respect, deserves love, and a chance at life.
And as Jena mentioned, the care pregnancy centers, this is something we need to be supporting. Our care pregnancy centers now more than ever because their work has multiplied, it's increased, their impact has increased. Chris, I'm going to give you the last minute. I got 1 minute left. You have the longest perspective here on the life issue as a champion for life. Tell me what encourages you going forward.
The people that are here, the fact that it's all based on believing that God can perform miracles.
And he has.
And we do ask for miracles. We ask for the women who have had abortions that they'll come to peace and reconciliation. And I know no other movement that I have ever been involved with, and I do a lot of human rights work in Congress, religious freedom, human trafficking, no other movement where the people right here in this audience, you, FRC, reaches out to women who have had abortions and say, we love you. God loves you, we love you. And for women who have unintended pregnancies and they're worried about it, and the pregnancy care centers are the lifeline. Yes. I can't tell you how many times I spoke at a pregnancy care center recently, a couple years ago, and 2 women got up and said, thank God the director was out there doing sidewalk counseling because we had our babies, and they told their story. It was beautiful. A few minutes later, 2 young girls got up, 12 and 13, I believe they were, and they started talk about school and sports and how pro-life they are. Then they turned to the woman who was the director and said, had you not been in the parking lot that day at the abortion clinic, we would have been dead. So this movement is all about love. It's all about, we don't hate our opponents. Love those who hate you. That's what we have to do based on Scripture. And it's hard sometimes, particularly in the political, as you know so well, in the political gives and takes. But to respect our opponents and try to persuade them. Bernard Nathanson, a man who said, I've come to the agonizing conclusion that I have presided over 60,000 deaths. He ran the biggest abortion mill in New York. He also was the founder of NARAL. He changed his position, and if he could change, because he was doing prenatal surgeries at St. Luke's Hospital. He wrote it in his book, Aborting America. And he said, there I am helping a child, a patient, and then in the other room or clinic, I'm killing the same baby with dismemberment or some other hideous method. It's all about, birth is an event that happens to all of us. It's not the beginning of life. And ultrasound has shattered any myth that somehow the child is not human and alive. They have unbelievable wake, sleep cycles and everything else. So, we got to hope we can persuade, stand in the gap, go into the wind. And I call on my fellow lawmakers in House, Senate, who are saying, just let the states handle it. Let's bend into that wind. I've had hard races myself. I've run 23 times, 43 years in the House of Representatives, almost lost a few times. It's worth the fight.
Yes, it is.
Because we're only in this because we're trying to defend moms and babies from the violence of abortion.
Chris, thank you so much. Jena, thank you. Harry, thank you. Thank our panel once again.
Thank you, Dan.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take all your belongings and exit the ballroom and the exhibit areas to allow preparation for this evening's session. Thank you.